The way my sister looked at him when he walked into the room, that was the first thing I noticed. Not the way a woman looks at someone she loves. More like the way you check the weather before stepping outside. Cautious. Measuring. Hoping it won't storm. I'd driven 6 hours from D.C. to get to her place in Greenville, South Carolina. 6 hours with bad coffee and a podcast I kept pausing because I couldn't focus. I hadn't seen my sister in 4 months. The longest stretch since she moved down there with her ex. Before that marriage fell apart and left her with a mortgage, a 10-year-old son named Ryan, and a kind of quietness she never used to have. Her name is Julia. She's 3 years older than me, and growing up, she was the loud one. The one who laughed too hard at her own jokes. The one who'd argue with teachers, with coaches, with our father when he was wrong. And he was wrong plenty. She had this laugh that took up a whole room. I hadn't heard that laugh in about 8 months. When I pulled into her driveway, the first thing I saw was an unfamiliar truck. Big, silver, newer than anything Julia could afford on a teacher's salary. It had one of those stick-figure family decals on the back window. Except someone had already added a silhouette of a man next to Julia's and Ryan's. 4 months, and there was already a sticker. Julia met me at the door before I could even knock. She hugged me fast and tight, the kind of hug that's also a little bit of a warning, and whispered close to my ear. "He's inside. Just please, Nora, keep it low-key." I didn't say anything. I just followed her in. He was sitting in the armchair by the window. Julia's armchair. The oversized one she'd had since college, the one Ryan used to curl up in to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. The man sitting in it looked about 50, broad-shouldered, the kind of tan that comes from outdoor work or a lot of golf. He had a glass of sweet tea on the side table that I was pretty sure Julia had brought him, and he was watching a game on TV with the volume turned up. Just a little too loud for conversation. He didn't stand up when I came in. "This your sister?" he said. "Not to me. To Julia." "Yes," Julia said. "Dale, this is Nora. Nora, this is Dale." He looked me over the way you look over something you're considering buying at a garage sale and deciding isn't worth the price. I was in jeans and a plain gray long sleeve because I'd driven 6 hours and packed for a weekend, not a performance. I had my hair in a bun and no makeup, and I was tired in the way that lives behind your eyes. He looked at all of that and nodded once. "Julia talks about you," he said. Then he turned back to the game. That was it. That was the introduction. I looked at my sister. She was smiling the way people smile when they're trying to convince you and themselves that everything is fine. I smiled back. Kept it low-key. Dinner that night was pot roast, which Julia had started before I arrived. She made it the way our mom used to, with carrots and potatoes and that thick gravy that takes all afternoon. Ryan sat next to me and talked the entire time about a video game he'd been playing, and I listened to every word because I'd missed him and because it gave me a reason not to look at Dale too directly. Dale ate without complimenting the food. He refilled his own glass without offering to refill anyone else's. At one point, Ryan knocked over a small cup of juice, the way 10-year-olds do. And before Julia could even reach for a napkin, Dale said, "Boy, what did I tell you about your elbows at the table?" Not a question. A statement. Low and flat. Ryan went very still. He was looking at the spreading juice like if he stared at it hard enough it would go back into the cup. "It's fine," I said, and grabbed my own napkin and started cleaning it up. I do it all the time. Occupational hazard. Dale looked at me. "What occupation is that?" "Clumsy," I said, and smiled pleasantly. Julia laughed. Actually laughed. A quick surprise sound, then pressed her hand over her mouth like she'd done something wrong. After dinner, while Julia put Ryan to bed, Dale and I were briefly alone in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, watching me rinse dishes with a kind of supervisory patience. "She tell you much about me?" he said. "Not a lot," I said. "You've been together about 6 months?" "7. He said it like the difference mattered. "I was in real estate before I retired. Commercial property, mostly. Did pretty well." He paused. "Julia mentioned you work for the government." "Something like that." She wasn't specific. He didn't phrase it as a question, but left a space for an answer. I handed the rinsed pot to the drying rack and dried my hands. "No, I guess she wasn't." He made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Not much of a talker, are you?" "I'm a pretty good listener," I said. Have a good night, Dale. And I went to find my sister. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 out of habit, the way I always do, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Dale was already at the table with a newspaper and a half-eaten piece of toast, and he watched me move around the kitchen with the particular expression of a man who has decided, without evidence, that you don't know what you're doing. Coffee's already made, he said. I see that, thank you. I poured myself a cup. It was weak. I didn't say so. Julia usually makes it stronger than that, I said after a sip. I like it how I like it, he said. I sat down across from him with my cup. He went back to his newspaper. After a moment, he said without looking up, She tell you about the roof? What about the roof? Needs replacing. 3-4 sections at minimum. I got a guy who can do it for $18,000, which is fair given what contractors are charging right now. He turned a page. She doesn't have that kind of cash sitting around. I kept my expression neutral. What's the plan? She'll need to dip into the equity. Home equity loan, probably. He said it the way you explain something to someone you don't think will understand. It's her best option. I can walk her through it. I've done it plenty of times. Has Julia said she wants to do it that way? He looked up then. I'm looking out for her, he said. That's what I do. Something moved through his eyes, just briefly, just a flicker, when I didn't immediately agree with him, like he wasn't used to the absence of agreement. Of course, I said, and finished my coffee, and went to shower before Julia was even awake. I took Ryan out that afternoon, just the two of us, to a place downtown that had good burgers and one of those old-school arcade sections in the back. He beat me twice at air hockey, and I let him beat me once at skee-ball, and he was happy in that loud, unself-conscious way kids are when they're not being watched by someone who makes them careful. On the way back, he was quiet for a while, watching the road, and then he said, Dale says, I'm too old for video games. I said, How old does he think you need to be? Ryan shrugged. He says men don't sit around playing games. He says my dad let me get soft. He said it in a flat voice, the way kids repeat adult words they don't fully understand, but have heard enough times that they've started to internalize them. Soft. Like it was a fact about him that had already been decided. You know what I think? I said. He looked at me. I think the people who tell kids they're soft are usually the ones who are scared of something. He thought about that for a second. Then, scared of what? Scared that if you turn out fine on your own, you don't actually need them. He looked back out the window. I don't know if he understood it, but he stopped looking quite so heavy, and that was enough for now. The thing with Dale escalated the way those things do. Not with a single explosion, but with a series of small moments that built pressure, the way weather builds before a bad storm. You notice the humidity, the stillness of the air, the way birds stop singing. That evening, Julia mentioned she'd been thinking about taking a part-time tutoring job on weekends to help with the roof fund. She said it lightly, the way she says things she's already pre-apologized for in her own mind. Dale set his fork down. We've talked about this, he said. I know, but I was just thinking I told you I have contacts. I have a plan in place. His voice didn't rise. That was the thing about Dale. His voice never rose. It just got very level and very certain, and it took up all the air in the room the same way a locked door takes up a hallway. You don't need to go scrambling for cash. It reflects poorly. On who? I said. Both of them looked at me. Julia's eyes went slightly wide. On her, Dale said. On the household. Julia's household, I said. That she owns. He looked at me for a long moment. Something settled in his expression, a kind of recalibration. You don't know the full picture, he said. I know my sister has been teaching for 12 years and managed this house and raised that kid just fine, and I know a tutoring job on Saturdays is her call to make. Julia put her hand on my arm. Nora, no, it's fine, Dale said, in a voice that meant it was not fine. He picked his fork back up. Let her talk. He said it like I was a child who had been given the floor temporarily and would be corrected when I was done. I looked at my sister. Her hand was still on my arm. Her eyes were saying please in the quiet language we've spoken since childhood, the raised eyebrow, the slight tilt of the head. She wasn't afraid, exactly, but she was asking me not to push it tonight. I let it go. Tonight. The next morning, Sunday, I was sitting on the back porch with my second cup of coffee, This time I'd made it myself, when Julia came out and sat beside me. Ryan was inside, still asleep. Dale was in the shower. She didn't say anything for a while. We watched a cardinal on the feeder she keeps by the fence. "He's not always like this," she said eventually. "What's he like when he's not like this?" She was quiet for a moment. "He's steady. He shows up. He fixed the back porch steps, and I didn't have to ask him twice. After the divorce, I was so tired of." She stopped. "I got tired of being alone, Nora. Ryan needs a man around, Ryan needs someone who doesn't call him soft," I said. She looked at her coffee cup. "He's working on that, and the roof thing, the equity loan he's already arranging for you?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "He knows more about that kind of thing than I do. That doesn't mean he gets to decide for you." I didn't say he was deciding. I said he was helping. I let that sit. Then I said he was helping. I let that sit. Then I said quietly, "Julia, does he know where you keep your financial documents?" She didn't answer. "Does he have access to your accounts?" "He's helping me budget," she said. I took her breath. I wasn't going to do this wrong. I'd waited this long. I could wait a little longer. "I love you," I said. "That's all." She leaned over and put her head on my shoulder briefly, the way she used to when we were kids. "I know," she said. "I know you do." It happened after lunch. I was coming back from the garage where I'd been looking at Julia's car. She'd mentioned a noise in the front left wheel that had been bothering her, and I'd wanted to check it out. I had grease on my hands, which I was wiping on a shop rag, and I was halfway through the kitchen when Dale came in from the living room and stopped in the doorway. He had a look on his face I hadn't seen on him before. Not the flat superiority from earlier. Something tighter. He'd been on the phone for the last hour, speaking in low voices, and I didn't know what had been said, but it had landed in him somewhere. "Where's Julia?" I said. "She went to get Ryan from the neighbors. They'll be back in an hour." He didn't move out of the doorway. "You and I should talk." "All right," I said. I kept wiping my hands. "Talk." "You've been here 3 days," he said, "and from the minute you walked in, you've been undermining me. In front of Julia. In front of the boy." His voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Heat, like an engine running too hot. "You don't know what I've put into this family, what I've shown up for." "I'm sure you've shown up for things," I said. "Julia was drowning when I met her. Financially, emotionally, Julia was managing. She was surviving. That's not the same." He took a step into the kitchen. "I have 20 years of life experience on you, young lady. I built things, I ran things, I know how the world works. You come down here for a long weekend and you think you understand the situation." "I understand my sister," I said. He pointed, one finger, direct, the same gesture he'd used with Ryan and the spilled juice. "Here's what I know about you," he said. "You work for the government. Some mid-level desk job in DC. You're 20 whatever years old and you've got opinions about things you haven't earned the right to have opinions about yet. And I'm telling you, as the man of this household, you're not," I said. "Excuse me. The man of this household, you don't live here. Your name isn't on this mortgage, it's not on the deed, it's not on any account. Julia owns this home. Julia runs this household." I set the shop rag down on the counter. "You're a guest, Dale." He stared at me. "A guest," he said very slowly, "who has been here every week for 7 months, fixing, managing, making sure things run. Guests don't get to point fingers at children," I said. "Guests don't decide when the homeowner gets a second job. Guests don't arrange equity loans on property that isn't theirs." I looked at him directly. "I've been listening to you all weekend. I've been watching how you talk to my sister, how you talk to her son, and I've been patient because Julia asked me to be, and because I love her, and I understand she needs to find her own way with this. But I am done being patient now." He laughed, an ugly, dismissive sound. "You're done being patient. You, a government secretary or whatever you are, you're done." "I'm a federal prosecutor," I said. The laugh stopped. "I'm an assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia. I've been doing this job for 5 years. I handle financial crimes, Dale. Real estate fraud, predatory lending schemes, elder financial abuse." I watched his face. "I noticed on my first morning here that you were already planning to walk Julia through a home equity loan on a property she owns outright, using contractors that you have a relationship with. I noticed that you have access to her accounts and her documents. I noticed that you've been systematically making her feel incapable of managing her own finances so that she'll defer to you. The color in his face had changed. He was very still. Now, I said, you can be offended by that. You can tell me I'm wrong. You can tell me your intentions are perfectly good, and this is all a misunderstanding. I kept my voice even, the same voice I use in a deposition. But I am going to sit down with my sister this week, and we are going to go through every document, every account, every arrangement you've put in place. And if I find anything that looks like what I think it looks like, we are going to have a very different conversation with a different audience. He opened his mouth. I'd think carefully before you say something right now, I said. I really would. He closed it. For a long moment, the kitchen was completely quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street. Then Dale straightened up, picked his jacket off the back of a chair, his jacket in someone else's kitchen, and walked out the back door. I stood there and listened to the sound of the big silver truck starting up in the driveway. I listened to it back out. I listened to it drive away. Then I sat down at Julia's kitchen table and I put my face in my hands and I just breathed for a minute, because that's what you do after. You breathe. Your hands shake a little and your heart rate comes down slowly and you breathe. Julia came home 40 minutes later with Ryan talking a mile a minute about something that had happened at the neighbor's house involving a garden hose and a dog. She saw the look on my face immediately. She always could read me, and she sent Ryan to his room to change clothes. Then she sat down across from me at the table. I told her everything. Not in the lawyer way, not the organized and referenced way. Just the plain way. What I had noticed, what I was worried about, what I had said, what he had done. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I knew something was off about the roof thing. He had the contractor's name and number saved in his phone already, before I'd even agreed to anything. I know, I said. I thought I was being paranoid. You weren't. She looked out the window. I thought this time I'd pick someone reliable, someone solid. I didn't want to be wrong again. You weren't wrong to want that, I said. He just wasn't that. She nodded slowly. She was doing the thing she does when she's deciding something, pressing her thumbnail against the pad of her index finger, just slightly, a small private motion she's had since she was a kid. I'm going to need to call the bank, she said. Yes, and I should probably change the code on the garage door. First thing tomorrow, I said. She looked at me. Did you actually threaten him with legal action? I described my job function and noted some observable patterns, I said. Technically. She almost smiled. Nora. He called me a government secretary. That got her, a small involuntary sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be sorry for him. He made his choices. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. We're okay. You're going to be okay. She turned her hand over and squeezed mine back. Outside, in the backyard, the cardinal was back on the feeder. Ryan would come downstairs in a few minutes wanting a snack and wanting to tell us about the dog, and we'd sit at this table and listen to him, and the afternoon would be ordinary and quiet and completely ours. That was enough. That was everything, actually. I stayed through Tuesday. We went through every document together, every account, every login. Dale had his name added to a joint savings account Julia had opened for household expenses, 7 months of her contributions, a little over $4,000. We removed his access on Monday morning. The banker was professional and efficient and did not ask questions, which I appreciated. The contractor Dale had recommended turned out to have a business address that was a UPS store mailbox in Myrtle Beach. I noted that and kept it somewhere in the back of my mind where I keep things that might become useful later. Julia called a licensed roofing company she found through the South Carolina Contractors Licensing Board, the actual licensing board, not a guy Dale knew, and got an estimate for $11,200. Not 18. She scheduled the work for the following month. The morning I left, Ryan walked me to my car and hugged me with both arms around my waist the way he does, face buried in my shoulder. You coming back soon? He said. 2 months, max, I said. Thanksgiving, if not before. He nodded like that was an acceptable contract. Then he went back inside to get ready for school. Julia stood by my car door. The morning was cool, that particular October cool that feels like the first honest breath after a hot summer. I keep thinking, she said, about how I almost didn't call you. When things started feeling off, I kept thinking I was overreacting, that you'd judge me. I would never judge you. I know that in my head. She paused. It's different from knowing it in the part of you that makes decisions at 2 a.m. I know, I said, but you did call, and I came. That's all that matters. She nodded. And next time, I said, call me before the sticker goes on the truck. She laughed. That laugh. The one that takes up a room, the one I'd been missing for the better part of a year. It rang out in the quiet morning air, and it was so good to hear it I had to press my lips together for a second so I wouldn't do something embarrassing. I got in my car. I drove back to DC. In the same 6 hours it had taken to get there, with better coffee this time, and the radio on low, and the particular kind of tired that comes from doing something that needed to be done. It's a good kind of tired, the kind you can sleep off. I did. I've thought a lot about Dale since that weekend. Not with anger, that passed somewhere around the Virginia state line on the drive home, more with a kind of tired clarity, the way you feel after you've finally dealt with something you've been putting off for too long. Here's what I keep coming back to. Dale didn't appear out of nowhere. He found my sister at a specific moment in her life, when she was exhausted, when she was rebuilding, when she had just enough vulnerability that steadiness looked like strength. That's not a coincidence. People like Dale have a sense for that. They look for the open door, not the locked one. And Julia isn't naive. She's one of the smartest people I know. But being smart doesn't protect you from wanting something badly enough that you overlook what it's actually costing you. She wanted steadiness. She wanted someone to show up. She got a man who showed up, and slowly, quietly, started rearranging the furniture. That's how it works. Not all at once. A small comment about the coffee, a suggestion about the finances, a word dropped in front of her son about being soft. Nothing dramatic enough to name. Just a slow, steady pressure. The kind that's hardest to push back against because you can never point to the exact moment it started. What I did that weekend wasn't dramatic either. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I just named what I saw, clearly and without apology, to someone who had counted on no one naming it. The power he had wasn't real. It was borrowed from silence. The moment the silence ended, so did the power. I think about Ryan most of all. 10 years old, already carrying around the word soft, like it's a verdict someone handed down about who he is. Kids absorb everything. They don't have the context to know that the man saying it is the one with the problem. They just hear it and file it somewhere deep. I've seen it in courtrooms, adults in their 30s and 40s still operating on damage that was done to them before they were 12. The things we say to children don't disappear. They go underground and grow, which is why the most important thing I did that weekend had nothing to do with Dale. It was sitting in that car with Ryan on the way back from Burgers and telling him the truth, that people who call others soft are usually afraid. He might not have understood it fully, but he heard it, and it sat next to the other thing. Nora didn't rescue Julia. Julia made the call. Julia sat with me at that table and went through every document and changed the garage code and found a legitimate contractor on her own. I just gave her the information she needed to trust what she already knew. That's all any of us can really do for each other. There's something I believe that I've watched play out enough times to stop questioning it, the choices we make, toward honesty, toward clarity, toward protecting the people we love, even when it's uncomfortable. Those choices accumulate. They build something. And the choices that go the other way, the small cruelties and the quiet manipulations, those accumulate too. Dale didn't lose because I threatened him. He lost because he had built 7 months of something on a foundation that couldn't hold weight. I just happened to be there when it gave. The last thing Julia said before I got in my car was that she'd almost not called me, that she was afraid I'd judge her. I keep thinking about that, about all the people sitting in their sister's kitchen or their mother's living room, watching something go wrong and saying nothing because they're afraid of how it will land. Call. Say the thing. Show up. That's it. That's the whole lesson. And it fits in 3 words.